We're back to Neil Haley's show. And you know what? I am going to honor this after my father. This interview, anytime we talk about the Navy, my father was a graduate from the Naval Academy 1949, and he basically was also a naval. So I got to listen to the first 5 episodes of Unsinkable, and they're awesome. So I'm excited to welcome John Mawson and Misha Crosby. Guys, thanks for stopping by. And this is so well done. And now I'm just wanting to know more, especially being a historian, meaning I have an undergrad in history, John. And it's just, I never learned about this before in the history books, this story.
Right. Well, straight out of school, I joined the British Merchant Navy. I was a deck officer for 11 years, 13 years, and I graduated, qualified as the ship's captain. And I knew this story. It's kind of baked into our DNA a bit. And there was a movie version of the story made back in 1943, which was really a propaganda piece for the Merchant Navy. It was fine. So I did know about it, and I started to work on issues about the Merchant Navy and their losses during the Second World War way back in 2008, and started to write bits and pieces about it. And I then started to develop it as a full-length feature film for screenplay in 2011, 12. I expanded it up into a TV version because there was this extraordinary court case that takes place just after it. And that's the backstory of how this came to be.
Oh, wow. And how did you guys connect? You two connect?
We've known each other for many years. The Brits seem to find each other in LA. There's almost like a homing beacon that seems to go out. But I think it was probably 2011 or there or thereabouts. We worked on actually a short project that John had put together, and have since, John's been a part of a feature that we put out at Datura that went to Lionsgate. We've worked on various things over the years until he sent me his script, his feature film script, The San Demetrio, and he eventually convinced me to read it, and I'm very glad I did.
Right. And kind of not to give everything away, John, tell us the background of the story, because, when you think about ships and you think about a sinkable ship, you think about the Titanic. But this is unsinkable, which is great, right? I guess the Brits win in one thing for sure now, because the Titanic and a lot of the US, but kind of explain specifically how this the story without giving everything away.
Sure. Well, obviously, this takes place in November 1940, so it's early days, pretty early days during the war. The United States hasn't come in. The Brits, we're on our own pretty much by then. France and Europe has been completely overrun, and we were dependent utterly on the sea trade supply lines, and ships were coming from, a lot of them from the States and Canada, across to the UK in convoy, protected by the Royal Navy, by the warships of the Royal Navy. And in this instance, the San Demetrio, the ship involved, she joined a convoy which set out from Halifax in Canada in November 1940. There's 38 ships, protected sadly by just one elderly warship, which was in fact a converted passenger ship, the Jervis Bay. And that convoy got halfway across the ocean before it was jumped by a brand new German battleship, the Admiral Scheer. And obviously things went horribly wrong. That's the start of the story. And maybe I don't go any further than that at this stage.
No, I definitely don't think you should go any further. But again, the way I love just to listen to this story, it just reminds you back. We're really, I guess, through podcasts and audio, we're really going back in history in a lot of ways to what people enjoyed listening to back in the day, where history's like repeating itself. Wouldn't you agree, Misha?
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted to try and create an experience that people could tune into. If it could be a family event, we would love that. We understand listening habits have changed, but we tried to go out here and put out something of the highest standards, and the highest cinematic standards at that, right? We worked with sound designers who have done a lot of work on James Bond, on Wonder Woman, on actually Band of Brothers, HBO's show, which is where we initially got drawn to Jimmy Boyle and his team. They had some wonderful World War II, libraries in there, which was so specific, and it was really useful for what we needed. You add in there then Stephen Endelman's composition, of which, this entire thing is fully scored, like fully orchestrally scored as well at that. So you have all of that instrumentation lined up in the timeline, from your violins to your cellos to your percussion to all of that. When you break this thing down, you know, you've got, with between that, the effects, the 100 different roles, you've got hundreds of tracks deep on this this timeline before it gets reduced into then what gets put out to the audience.
So, John, how important was it for you to depict your story to sound the best possible? That's got to be huge. How many times you went through it to make sure it's exactly what you like?
It's production in terms of, pre-production, rewriting the screenplay and starting to build the concept of it, taking out the idea of having removing narration completely, trying to work out how to tell the story without narration, in a cinematic way as possible, but without clunky exposition. That obviously took a long time. It took us nearly 5 or so months to record all 37 actors, all over 100 roles. Everybody separately. It was COVID, so people were in individual studios. Then the post-production, Misha can talk to more, but we worked on that for over a year to get that into a shape that we felt was as good as it could possibly be. And we decided, I think, pretty much from the outset that we were going to go with the concept of making something that maybe had never been made before, which is an audio movie.
Yeah, so that's that. I want to ask Misha that question, but I'm gonna ask that question. What is an audio movie? Because, you know, I'm a podcaster. I started out in radio. I was a podcaster at the same time as radio. Now we've gone to this production audio movie. Define that.
So it was a term that came up from a BBC radio guy called Jack Bowman, who'd come over to the US and talked to John and I about the project. And it was around when, you know, COVID had just hit the world, and all of a sudden our plans to move this into, you know, a feature film production had been put on hold. He said, "If you guys thought about doing this as an audio movie?" And we're like, "What the hell's an audio movie?" And he proceeded to tell us. He said, "Well, imagine a production with full cinematic sound design, with orchestral score, possibly putting it out in Dolby Atmos as well, but just without the pictures." And we're like, okay, let's sort of break that down and see if that's even possible. And we kind of, for something that was so, you know, action centric as this, as it is in its moments, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's, you know, it's full action all the way through, as you know, but there are moments that are very complicated. Some of these sequences where you have very large ships and very visual sequences, and we wanted to see if that was even going to be possible to translate in an audio sphere. So we did a little test, just even for ourselves, very early on in that process. Just had a few actors locally in LA record, some of them under covers at the time, send us back some performances, and then layered in some very basic sound design. And well, I say basic, it wasn't bad at all, but we added in some score as well, just to see if it could work. And sure enough, it was visually translating quite cinematically. And so it was a path then we decided to go down again and try and bring in you know, some of the most talented people in the world from the film world.
Yeah. And John, I remember sometimes when I was driving in the car of my kids and they're watching a movie, I'm listening. I could tell there's something different when I was previewing this today, listening to the five, and I'm like, wow, this sound quality, it feels like I could be closing my eyes and watching a movie while closing my eyes. You really, that's the level it is.
Yeah, and we did a lot of listening with our eyes closed to make sure it worked, you know, and adjusting the sound slightly. It's like we're not quite hearing enough of the flames here, or the sea isn't quite there, or it's coming from slightly the wrong direction. And when we were recording the actors, because of my background in the Merchant Navy, I was able to give them the physical environments. So how far apart are they? How much background noise is there? Are they surrounded by metal or wood? How loud do they need to be? As well as the accuracy of how people talk to that at that time, on the technical stuff. Whereas Misha, he has got a great ear for truthful performance and appropriate performance. So we work together completely in lockstep throughout the production and post-production era, getting this as good as we possibly could and making every moment as truthful and as inclusive as possible.
Absolutely. And Misha, the cast is unbelievable. They're so well. Finding that cast, was that a challenge?
A little bit. It was just a lot of persistence, really, is the best way I can put that. You know, there's a classic saying in Hollywood, everyone loves to be first to be second, right? And so after we signed Brian, of which when I called John and told him it was amazing to hear a grown man's voice go up about 4 octaves as he physically ascended to the table that he was dancing on. And then, you know, from there, we were able to, you know, bring on some of those other names that you have, you know, from Malkovich to Thomas to Natalie, who were on our list as well to cast. And quite frankly, now, you know, with that cast set in, and Thomas, as you know, is very much playing the lead of this. It's really difficult for us to envisage anybody doing a better job. He really embodies that role so well. It's almost like Thomas was born to play somebody of that era.
Yeah. Wow. John, you got to be happy where it's going and now the next phase. So define how people can listen to this. How does it work for an audio movie? Is it available on a podcast network, or is it available on download? How does it go for people to
So
start?
it's going to be available on Wondery Plus. The first 2 episodes come out on the 10th, on Wednesday, 2 days' time, worldwide via YouTube links, but feeding back into Wondery. And they'll be available for everyone to listen to for free with no commercials. After that, it comes out weekly on Wondery Plus for 90 days. So it'll be available purely on Wondery Plus for 90 days. And after that, it will go worldwide. You know, but you can get to it via any of your usual sources if you go to Apple Music or to Spotify and so forth. And we are the flagship on the American storytellers,
History storytellers.
history storytellers
Oh,
that
wow.
Wondery are doing. And so there's a whole lot of other great shows as well coming out on Wondery Plus. But we're kind of the first one to coming out on Wednesday.
So Misha, there's going to be others on Wondery Plus that are going to be audio movies as well.
I
No.
wouldn't say audio movies, but certainly like they have a history-centric theme to them. So that was part of the campaign that they wanted to run, with Unsinkable being the flagship show for them.
All right. So I want to break this down without giving it away. I love that you incorporate the characters to really, this is where I was like, okay, I'm listening to an audio movie. Let me get through that. Oh my. Then by the time the 5th episode came, I'm like, no, I want to keep listening. That you really involve the characters to really live through this, John, and really live what's going to happen. How did they deal with it? Not just on the ships, but also at home, and really gave you a good story of that. How did like that to really tell that story and make it take place of really understanding, you know, there are wives out there waiting for them. I think it's a story that you wouldn't think when you read the beginning thing, thinking, are we really going to get into those lives in an audio movie? And you did.
Yeah, I wanted to. I mean, part of it comes from my family background. My parents were both, and my entire family at that level, that all my aunts and uncles were utterly in uniform and engaged. My father was a doctor in the paratroopers. My mother was in the Women's Royal Navy and worked as a code breaker at Bletchley Park. All my uncles were in the Royal Navy, and all their friends were. And I can remember, for example, my aunt telling the story of how she got married in the middle of the worst bombing by Germany during the daytime in November at that time. And that's a reason why you will find there actually is a wedding takes place. And that's as pretty much as related to me by my aunt. So I had this truthful history to draw on. But at the same time, I thought it's so vital that not only do the guys who suffered and gave so much to this country, to our country, to keep us alive during the war, but the sacrifices of the people back home. I wanted to tell that story, that side of it as well.
Yeah. And that's where it's going. And then I'm thinking, I have all of it, right? And then you guys had to just give me only a piece of it. I mean, I'm like, oh my goodness, because then I'm like, okay, I got through this, meaning I'm enjoying this. And then I'm like, this didn't give me an ending. You always have an ending, but I'm also could see me go back and listen again Unlike a movie, an audio movie might give you an opportunity because people are at work, they might be working on something, they might miss a specific spot, and they'll go back again. Did you guys ever think if you guys coin this audio movie, it might have an opportunity to be listened to more times than once, Misha?
We hope so. Like there's certainly a lot of specificity and depth in there for the people that want to give it not only a second listen, but give it the attention that we hope that they will. It was interesting. We've had a few people now have some early preview listens of this in the press, and they said to us, "Listen, we were planning on getting some other stuff done while we had this on in the background, and after about a minute or two, we very much realized that wasn't going to be the case." And they sat down and they said, "No, I was into it, and I was listening intently." And listen, there's a surface level you can listen to this at, and that's absolutely fine. But if you take the time to invest in it, we really hope you'll get some return for your ears, because there's certainly some specificity, even down to some of the sound effects that are used. For instance, there's a scene where some specific engines are going over above, some Rolls-Royce Maryland engines from fighter jets at the time. Those are those real engines that you will find going above you. There are specific types of guns from that era that are used. Absolutely the real sound effects. And so yeah, there's detailed work for those that want to explore.
Do you what I think that what brings the table, John, is that it's so well done, in the hope, and who knows where audio movies are going to go, and you'll be the first, right? That's your hope, right? Saying, okay,
we're so pleased by the reaction we're getting from people who have been given the first 5 episodes, that people are saying, you know what, this is groundbreaking, this is new, I've never heard anything so movie-like in the audio sphere before. And so we're really pleased that people are agreeing with what we have hoped people would think, which is, yeah, this is an audio movie. And we've had a lot of people come to us and say, you know what, this would be great for the visually impaired.
Yes.
And maybe we would love to have it out and put it out in a sort of limited release in movie houses, so that people can come to the theater and sit and listen, maybe to the whole thing at one go, because we think that would be an experience people would really enjoy.
I hope this ends up more in the history books, in the U.S. history books. If you're a teacher that listens to my show still because of, you've been downloading it as more education podcast back in the day, and you've been listening to me for over 15 years. If you're in education, you definitely need to share this with your classes in history. That's no doubt. And I think that this should have been the history books, especially in the US. I'm sure it was in British history books, but not in the US history as much, to talk about this, because this was such an important part to understand what happened on the naval fights in during World War II, and how awful it was that it was not just the people that signed up to fight, but other people that ended up getting hurt.
Well, all these sailors were civilians. They weren't members of the armed forces.
Right.
So just ordinary civilian working guys. And it's the nearest we came to losing the war was this battle, this one battle, in both First and Second World Wars, and the sacrifices that they gave. And we, again, within the story, you'll find as you listen to more, we wanted to really honor those people and their sacrifice. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this, was to remind people, because I think it is something that has started to fade from memory. I think people, certainly in the UK at the time, absolutely understood the importance. There was rationing, and there was a reason we were otherwise going to starve to death. But it is a story that I felt was fading, and I wanted it not to fade.
All right. The best place, people, very simply, they go to Apple Podcast, any of the different podcast networks, or Wondery, to check out the first episodes of Unsinkable that come out on Wednesday, July 10th. Correct, guys?
Yeah, and then there are inside the episodes sort of 5-minute videos that, so if people have enjoyed an episode, they can then watch a video where we discuss how we made it, interviews with the cast, composer, and so there's a little bit more background. So if people are really interested, they can gather more then.
All right, we appreciate it, guys. Thanks again.
Thank you, Neil.
You're listening and watching the Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.